Welcome to another episode of And Action with your host, 𝗵𝗃 𝗵𝗆, brought to you by CalCap Studios and Casting Calls America. We've got just a really special, unique guy tonight. Kevin Berlandi is a director, an assistant director. He's worked on gigantic projects, smaller projects. We had a chance to talk a few minutes right now in the green room before we went live. Fascinating guy. I can't wait to bring him on set, which we'll do right now, Bex. Let's bring him on right now. Hey, Kevin.
How you doing?
Oh, man, so good. So you and I were talking backstage. You are a fascinating individual. You've got all this heritage and stuff you've done and all those fun things. And it's like, where do I even start with you? But before I even get into any of that, you know, we live in a world where some things are going on right now. And I want to talk about it for a minute with you. It's troubling my heart. It's not fun things that we're going to talk about right now, but I think we owe it because you, as a Korean-born American now, this is affecting you. And what I'm talking about is the hate that's going on right now in this country and around the globe, practically for every other country as well. And Kevin, what are your thoughts about it? What is going through your mind as you're watching the news the last couple nights? How can we even begin to rectify this and help and make it better?
Well, I appreciate you asking, and I appreciate you addressing it. It's this isn't anything necessarily new for the community in terms of what we're faced with and sort of what's going on. I think it's gotten to a place that's far greater than it has ever before. You know, I know that the number of incidents against the community are just astronomical, especially in the past year. And I know what's motivating it, and you know, there's a lot of rhetoric and there's a lot of blame that's being tossed around. But I think it's completely and totally inappropriate, and it needs to stop. And I think a lot of it just comes with this idea that I just think people don't necessarily understand or know us or know the community, because I think it's really hard to do these things if you know somebody or you know the community. And I think a lot of it can be solved by conversations with people that you know of color and that you know that are Asian. And I think a lot of it also can just be done with enforcing the laws that we have. And if you are in the Asian community, you know, you've got to be a little bit more aware right now and keep your head on a swivel. And hopefully this will spark a greater conversation nationally that will address some of the issues that we've been facing our whole lives.
I'm glad you said that. You know, obviously you take a look at me. I'm not somebody who's ever had to deal with that. I don't have a racist bone in my body. I grew up in the Bay Area where my friends were Filipino and Black and Chinese and Japanese and Korean. So for me growing up, you know, people say, don't say this, but I will say, I don't see color. I don't see race, because that's what I grew up with. So it's foreign to me when I'm watching the news and I'm hearing things out of people's mouths, and I'm like, what? How does that happen? How does that take place? And you know, I noticed it most ironically when Jeremy Lin was getting big in basketball. When Jeremy Lin was rising in the NBA, all of a sudden I would see all these comments and people. I'm like, where is this coming from? It just is so vile to me. So, you know, we're all created equal. And I'm not better than Kevin. Kevin's not better than me. We're all put on this earth with special gifts. And far be it from anybody to think they're higher than someone else in terms of their skin color or vocation or socioeconomic status. So, I mean, we could go on and on about this, Kevin, but I did want to address it with you and get it out there so people know that it's something that needs to be addressed and taken care of.
Yeah, well, listen, I appreciate you addressing it. It is one of the things that motivates me in what I do. And it's, you know, part of what has driven me to the profession that I'm in. I think how, as a community, we're portrayed needs to be addressed. I think we're starting to see some really great inroads. And I think if you just look at the nominations this past week for the Academy Awards, I think it's an amazing feat that Minari has done as well as it has. So same with Nomadland. I think what Lee Isaac Chung and 𝗵𝗆 𝗵𝗆 are doing are phenomenal. And the fact that Steve Yoon's nominated, it's just, you know, I think an understanding, especially coming after Parasite, you know, just sweeping last year, that storytelling, you know, is storytelling, and it's doesn't have to necessarily be one particular race or color, or sexual orientation or identity. I think there's story is story, and what's compelling is always going to be compelling.
Yeah.
So I think we're starting to see that change. I'm trying to be part of it as much as I can, in a good way.
Yep.
So, but I appreciate you addressing it.
Yeah, you bet. We're going to tell our audience who you are and what you do, because they're like, Kevin, who is this guy? So this is Kevin. I'm going to read your bio. I shortened it a bit because we didn't have all night. Like, your bio would have taken 28 minutes to go, but here's your bio. Born in Seoul, South Korea, and having been raised in Boston, Kevin Berlandi's style, as well as his contagious enthusiasm for film, were fostered by his childhood love of summer blockbusters. It's only fitting that Kevin would grow up to AD on movie franchises like Transformers, Avengers, and the Bourne Legacy. Before that, he earned a master's degree in marketing and advertising with concentration in film production from Emerson College. After graduating, he traveled the world while working on numerous credited features. Kevin has also participated in the Directors Guild of America's Director Development Initiative, Sony's television directing program, and CBS's directing program. He has directed multiple episodes of Bull and an episode of Criminal Minds on CBS, then went on, this is my favorite part, helped to create and shape the Guild's effort to increase diversity within directing ranks of episodic television as the former co-chair of the Asian American Committee at the Directors Guild of America. Kevin Berlandi, we are proud to have you on the show, my friend.
Thanks, Ricky.
That's a lot, right? That's a lot.
It's, and just to clarify, it was a Bachelor of Science, not a Master.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's okay.
Yeah. Hey, I'm glad you clarified. Okay, so we talked behind. We've already. So we're gonna skip what we talked about behind the stage. Maybe we'll have you come on next time. But I'm curious, what are some of those summer blockbusters you grew up on that just like were like, man, this is it for me? What were those movies?
Well, I mean, I love to start with sort of the influence of Michael Bay, because all of his early work was that he did with Bruckheimer, and I'm like totally drawing a blank where he escapes Alcatraz with Nick Cage, The Rock. I mean, come on, that opening sequence.
Oh yeah,
with the Navy SEALs breaching was just absolutely tremendous. And then of that era, I mean, you pretty much talk about anything that that Jerry produced and during that time. I think it was just so fascinating for me to watch, and it was one of those things where the technology of the time was really being utilized to elevate and amplify the storytelling. Just simple things like being able to overcrank the camera and have that fast camera movement that brings you from one place to another, where you cover hundreds of miles within seconds. I think of The Rock, and just how he was able to move that camera, and then just also the perception and all the parallax that he creates was for me for the first time. I was like really like, oh my gosh, like this energy that's brought to the screen was just so overwhelming and
Absolutely.
Compelling to watch.
But so here you are in your left hand, you've got all these summer blockbusters, Michael Bay, these films you're watching growing up that are just like high speed octane movies. And then over here, you're like also the Muppets and MTV. So you've got this scale. So tell me about that. Tell me about the Muppets and MTV. What was the influence on that?
Well, so, I grew up, at the time where television was in every household. Houses had multiple TV sets. And, I want to say probably when I was 12 or 13, we got cable into the house. And so all of a sudden there was, so many more channels, movies on constantly. It was just one of those things where it was ingrained in my upbringing. And so visual storytelling and the language of visuals was something that, was just part. It was like how you learn how to read and write. I learned how to watch TV. I learned how to understand what an edit was and, what was good and what was bad. And I just consumed a lot of content as a child, much to the dismay of my parents. And, I think, I chuckle because, my mother would always tell me to turn the idiot box off and go outside, that it wasn't going to ever lead to anything. And here
Well, you know what's really funny about that?
television.
Well, everybody in their mind right now is probably thinking that your mother was also Korean, but you were raised by Italian Americans in Boston. So you've got an Italian mom saying, "Hey, turn off the idiot box" in Boston. What was that like? I mean, just really briefly, what was that like growing up in Boston? You're in a dual ethnicity home. Your parents, I mean, how was that? Was that fun or was that challenging?
No, it was great. You know, my family is amazing, and I had a very blessed childhood, and I've got two siblings, and parents that love me, and being from the New England area, I had a pretty stereotypical New England upbringing, if there is such a thing. But I was fortunate that I was athletic, because if you're not athletic in New England, you're gonna get beat up.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you're a person of color in a very white centric culture, there, it was again, I always say my saving grace was that I could run fast.
That's hilarious.
So growing up, I played sports, and that was really how I sort of viewed the world, was through athletics, and what season, what sport it was. But I always tell people that having the biracial family was really helped inform my point of view as a director. I've always sort of felt like I was stuck between two worlds. Like I was raised in an Italian American family, but I don't look Italian American. But I certainly don't behave or have the common language that someone that was born and raised in Korea, or even LA for that matter. I live in LA now, and there's a huge Korean community here, and my wife is Korean American. And so, through my life, I have a much deeper understanding of what it means to be Korean. Obviously, as a kid, I had no idea what that meant, but, that's always been something that I felt like has informed the perspective as a director and how to tell a story. Being able to be in a room and not be in that room at the same time, or be seen and unseen all at once. And so to me, it's been a blessing, because I think having that perspective and having lived that life has really informed how I direct, and the point of view that I take.
Not to take anything away from that, but there's a burning question. I mean, I'm assuming you're a Red Sox and Patriots guy.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, see, that's why we
the
can't
other
be
thing
best
is,
friends.
well, the other thing too is if you're not, you're definitely going to get beat up.
Right, exactly, yeah.
No.
I mean, I'm 49ers and A's. I grew up in Fremont, which is like 5 minutes from Oakland and San Francisco. So, but I mean, that is quite an interesting upbringing for somebody. I mean, you're adopted, you come to Boston, which is like, I mean, talk about like where people look at America. It's like San Francisco, New York, Boston would be another place. So you're like in the heart of America. Can you turn that accent on anytime you want, by the way? Does that just come out if you need it? No, you can't do it? All right.
No. Right. I was fortunate that I grew up, just west of the city.
Okay.
If you grow up north and south of the city, though,
that's where it's
typically where you find the accents, the heavy ones for that matter. But no, I can't.
Don't even try. Don't even try. All right. So there's a line in one of your bios that really stuck out to me, and it says, Kevin's talents landed him in positions on the directorial teams of his idols and industry giants like Michael Bay, Mike Nichols, Rob Reiner, Gore Verbinski, and Christopher Nolan. So I have a three-pronged attack here. I always say that talent gets you in the room and character keeps you there. So how did you get in the room with these guys? And then because of your character, you're able to do more. But everybody's dying to know, like, how did this dude get in the room with these guys, these directors in America that are like the top of the – that doesn't always happen. Not just one, but I just rattled off 5. How did that happen?
Well, so, it's a long process. It's, that doesn't sort of happen overnight. But for anyone that's, beginning their journey, it's these small steps. Every time you take a little step, it adds up, it becomes cumulative. So when I first moved to LA, I really didn't have any connection to the industry. I had 2 family friends that I was not necessarily really close with. Well, I should say that, but I had two connections. One was an exec, and the other was an assistant director. And you know, the exec really didn't, you know, isn't able at that point to be able to like plug me in other than as like a temp or something within the corporate structure. But the AD was like, you know what, I can bring you on as an additional PA. And so he got me a couple jobs, and I was able to make some connections with other ADs that were going on to other projects. And it was one of those things where I showed up to set the first couple of days and had a little bit of experience having worked on student films at Emerson, but I really hadn't worked on a professional set. And what it came down to was just that I had the, you know, the awareness of understanding sort of how the flow of the set worked, and then just this undying energy to just like get it done.
Yep.
And if you have a good attitude and the ability to work hard, and you're smart, you've got to be smart. You've got to be perceptive and understand and read a room and know where to be able to like run to, or, well, you shouldn't really be running, but be able to have that kind of like attitude of like, I'm just going to run around and get stuff done. That will get you very far in the first step of your career, which is just getting rehired and getting work and being able to pay your bills. And so, you know, for the first couple of years out here in LA, I just day played as a PA. And it was a grind. I mean, it was like, you know, waking up at 4:30 in the morning for early calls. But what you do is you wind up meeting a lot of ADs as a day player. And then eventually one of their staff either becomes an AD or goes to another film, and they've got an opening, and they're going to hire the person that has been hustling and working hard and being consistent.
And positive attitude.
That's right. And, you know, so I was able to parlay that into getting connected with a really good AD team. And from there, wound up on set with Michael Bay, and did a bunch of movies with Michael. And sort of once you have a couple credits like that, then, you know, you get a reputation as being someone that can handle a tough set, high intensity, high octane, a lot of stuff going on, very kinetic. And that allows, it's much easier at that point to start working with other directors that are doing things of that nature.
So this question I should have given you a week ago to think about, but I'm going to give it to you on the spot right now. All of those directors across the board, did you recognize any similar traits and talents and things that made them who they are? Like, that's why these guys are at the top, because they all share this in common. Anything like that? For sure.
You know, I think all of them, you know, the sort of the obvious things have a clear vision of what story they're telling. You know, they have a mastery of craft. That was the other thing too that I noticed, was that, you know, by the time I worked with all of these directors, they were well established in their careers. So I was able to, you know, sort of see how they operated, and, you know, saw that they weren't getting tripped up on craft. So, you know, just as a sort of lame example, like on a scout, they'd step out of the van and they'd look around, and they, you know, could tell almost instantly, oh, this location's not going to work. And it's not going to work before they even got into the creative component to it, logistically. Because they knew they'd have to park the trucks too far. The cast would spend an hour getting to set. You know, the sun wasn't going to be in the right position, so they're going to have to bring in a lot of gear to fight it all day long. And there were just these things and decisions like that that can be made quickly, saved a lot of time and money. And it was one of those things that they all had that grasp of craft.
That's fascinating.
So that when they got to set on the day, they had the time to work on what sparked the scene, what was creative about that moment, and you don't do that without having a really great plan and schedule.
That's right. I mean, the two films that I've done as a director, you have to live and breathe it. And you would say the same thing about the things you've worked on. As the director, I love how the UK defines a director. They call him the author of the film. I love that. I wish we would use that terminology here in the States, but it really is true. Like, it is everything. Like, you want to talk about from start to finish, it's the director. So I agree with you. We have to clear something up though before we go any further. So Bex, can you please throw on the picture that I have from your Instagram? It is your very first Instagram photo. What the heck are we looking at here, Kevin? I need you to explain this. It's 8 years old. What are we doing?
So there's a commercial that's playing on screen. It's for Canal Plus. It never aired here, but if you look closely, there's a bear.
Yes.
And it's a bear skin rug that's actually directing.
Oh.
And he's in a pre-pro meeting and he's having a very director moment where he throws all the papers up in the air, tells everybody that they don't know what the F they're doing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the spot, they pay it all off because the bear rug has been sitting in front of a television watching Canal Plus all of these years, and it gives him the experience to be able to become this auteur. And a friend of mine gave me a little tchotchke of a bear rug, and so I placed it on the coffee table and just thought it was very meta that the bear rug tchotchke was watching the bear rug direct in a commercial. Perfect. After having watched all this.
That's a great story, and I'm just going to say it. Maybe you should have put that in your Instagram post. There's literally not one word. It's just that picture, and I'm like, what is? And it's your first post ever, so I'm going to give you a pass on that. All right, so
it was my introduction to Instagram, and you know, I've always said, you know, a picture says 1,000 words.
Yeah. So my first Instagram picture is of me at Burger King when they used to have the balls your kids could jump in. Now they're all, you know, unsanitary. I just snapped a selfie in front of the balls and the playset, and that's my no caption, nothing at all. So I get it. It's like Instagram was a different beast 10 years ago. Okay, so you've AD'd on Bourne, on Avengers, and we could spend a half hour talking about what that was like. So briefly, what was that like? And then my question to follow that up is, what is the difference between that kind of set and working as a director on episodic television? Like, I know you didn't direct these other films, but you know, what's the difference? Because they're both very intense for separate reasons.
Sure. So, you know, when you're working on a franchise film of any kind, there's a lot going on. And it's usually, you know, a variety of things in terms of big talent that, you know, needs to be, I hate to say the word catered to, but they need a certain amount of support, just in terms of maintaining their privacy, getting them to and from set safely. And there's typically also a lot of stunts and effects and visual effects. So there's just a lot of moving pieces that, you know, need to be coordinated and understood and done safely. So it's kind of like being in one of those movies to some extent. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's a lot of what we do comes down to, like, you know, telling the story here, right. Like, you know, like what so as big as those things get, you know, it's also making sure that you can create an intimate environment for the director and actors to do what they do best.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And then, you know, for episodic TV, it's, you know, depending upon the show, there's very similar effects and very similar stunts. And obviously, you know, the talent and cast there is just as large. Yeah. But, you know, the thing that is sort of the biggest thing, as, you know, being a director of that, you have to service the overall property, the show itself. And that means knowing what that show is so that you're not breaking the mold. And then being able to impart what you do as a director in an organic way so that it's not sort of jarring for anybody that's watching the show that's seen the scene. But, you know, you're dealing with typically a shooting schedule of 8 days. So you got to do a lot to, you know, to get and to deliver something that can go on air and live in the world of whatever that show is.
Great answer. I love that. Coming up for me, when I was cutting my teeth, the term director and first assistant director to me was like, oh, well, that must be the guy that hangs out with the director and gets to co-direct the film and all that stuff. First AD, second AD could not be further in my mind creatively from directing. Like they're night and day. So Obviously, I think you would prefer directing, but how and why did you decide, okay, you know, I've AD'd on some pretty big things. Now I want to direct. What was the decision there?
You know, I made that choice kind of early on because photography is a huge interest of mine, and I really was considering going the route of cinematographer. But the thing for me was always sort of came down to craft. And as an assistant director, you touch all the departments. You're interfacing with all of them, and on some level, you need to have a fairly deep understanding of what they do and how they do it in order to accurately manage everybody in terms of the schedule and timing. Not that you have to like manage people, but
right.
And to me, that spoke to the craft of directing, because when you can have all of that be automatic and you don't have to think about those things, it really frees up your brain to focus on the creative execution and being able to find the authentic moment, the through lines, the emotional components. Because as a director, you're really the litmus test as to whether or not someone watching is going to believe what they see.
Yeah.
And if you can't do that, then it's not going to work. And what blocks and interferes with that can oftentimes be the logistics.
Yeah.
And knowing that you've got like 3 minutes to get something done, or else it's not going to get done.
Right.
And then you've got a much smaller window after that to get the next. And so all of these things can compound unless you have the confidence going in that you've prepared all of the stuff that needs to show up. So, for example, my cousin is a Navy SEAL, and he said something to me once that really struck me. And he said, professionals talk logistics, not tactics. Because what you're going to do is, it's like automatic. If you're good at what you do, that's automatic. But what you need to be concerned about is making sure all of the things that you need to do that show up on time and at the right place. And it really sort of struck me. I was like, yeah, that's kind of like filmmaking. If all those pieces aren't coordinating and converging at the same moment, then it doesn't matter how amazing you are at dealing with talent if they're not standing on set at the right moment for the light to be great to get the, you know what I'm saying? So to me, that was the thing that drove me to that decision. Long-winded answer, sorry.
No, that's great, because we are done now. That our time is up. It's like bang, bang, bang. The best answer of the night came at the end. It's all that stuff you said is, I love it, because the people who watch this show are up and coming mostly, and they're trying to break in the industry. So now if they watch this episode, they're like, what Kevin Berlandi said, that's exactly what I need to do and start doing. So Kevin, thank you for joining us tonight. You are awesome. We got to have you back. I've got like 14 more questions I didn't even get to. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.